Joining me today is Shawn Khunkhun from Dolly Varden Silver. Shawn, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I got to ask you, first off, I'm sure you're talking to lots of people here at the conference and you're hearing about various deals. What's the buzz at the conference here? What are you hearing about?
The buzz at the conference, that's a really good question. I think the main takeaway that I've had so far is it's still early days, that despite record high commodity prices, there's still an incredible opportunity in the equities. And there's this quiet confidence amongst the issuers and the investors because the commodities are leading and they're telling them and they're giving them confidence. For example, if you look at some of the Q1 earnings, or what we project to be the Q2 earnings, where you look at some of these average prices in the metals compared to where they were in 2023, I think we're in an incredible environment. And if you look at 2023 as a year and the lack of capital, I'll give you a statistic. If we look at brokered financings for resource issuers, it was under $2 billion in 2023. And to put that into context, if you go back a decade to 2013, which was an awful year, a year that gold fell from 1,500 to 1,300 in a day in April of 2013, there was $6 billion in brokered equity financing. So I'm comparing 2023 to a horrible year, and we were raising 30 cents on the dollar of what we were doing in 2013. If you compare those numbers to the heyday of 2010, 2011, it's even more dismal. What we've seen this year is a pickup in M&A, a pickup in financing, and specifically a part of the market that I'm most interested in, the silver market. We're into a new paradigm with silver going from 25 to 31. Almost all projects are now economic that are in production. And it's companies that were struggling, that were dying, that were going out of business in September are now flush with cash.
Mm-hmm. And for us, what we're hearing when I go and I just chat with the investors here or the various executives, investor types, it's silver. That's where the excitement is. And I'm not just saying that because you are Dolly Varden Silver. It is just that's the conversation that we're getting. Now, last night I actually went and I had a drink with Keith Neumeyer from First Majestic, and what he was saying to me, and I asked him, I said, Keith, we're in our fourth consecutive year of a silver deficit. Where's the bulk of the growth in silver going to come from? His response was, it's not out there. Relative to the amount of silver that we need, the production it's not really out there. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, Keith's my hero. Okay. The fact that he understands how the bullion banks are manipulating the price of silver, and the fact that he has got the knowledge of that is one thing, but to have the guts and the resources to do something about it, with what he's doing in Las Vegas with his mint, mm-hmm. and the 10 million ounces of silver, First Majestic is producing, I think, 20 million ounces on a silver equivalent basis, but 10 million ounces pure silver is not going to go into the system, mm-hmm. right? And so you're not going to see 250 million ounces of paper silver trade because of what Keith is doing. And if more silver mining CEOs took that lead, and Keith's a trailblazer, and that's why you say, literally, when I was a kid, I used to have sports athletes on my walls. Mm. If I had posters on my walls today, they'd be of people like Keith Neumeyer, because he's blazing an incredible trail, and he's absolutely right. Look, as an industry, we're producing about 800 million ounces of silver. You multiply that by the spot price, that's $24 billion. That's what NVIDIA trades in a day and a half. Mm-hmm. So it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And that's why if we just look at two buyers of silver, Indian consumers and people looking for photovoltaics use, the solar industry, those two segments of the market represented 35% of demand in Q1, right? So what I'm seeing here is, and particularly primary silver mines, right? Primary silver mines give us about 200 million ounces of those 800 million ounces. Solar's going to eat that up, right? And so we're going into an environment where most silver comes as a byproduct from copper mines or lead mines, zinc mines. And those mines and those commodities are also going to be facing deficits.
Yep.
So that's the key. And I'm telling you, of these primary silver mines, you look at some of Hecla's mines, for example. You can't just give Hecla a few $1 billion and say increase production. Those are narrow deposits. Those are deep mines. The amount of capital required to get more production on these primary mines, and even if the finances were limitless, it still takes time. It takes time to permit, takes time to build, construct. So I think we're going to find ourselves in a moment where silver breaks out, and Chen Lin had made some incredible comments about 30 to 50, right? If you take out, and Chris Marcus taking out the two highs, the $50 highs, right? Silver is actually trading at an all-time high if you take out those spikes. Take out those spikes. We're at an all-time high right now, but even bring back the spikes and do some inflation-adjusted pricings. Where should we be? We should be into the 70s right now. That's where silver should be based on how much money's been printed, as an inflation hedge, and I think we're going there.
Something I was watching Peter Schiff the other night, and something I sometimes do, and I trying to wind down at night after working all day. I'll sit and watch.
That'll wind you up.
Yeah, and they were talking about how with all the debt that exists in the system, we're talking personal debt, we're talking government debt, we're talking corporate debt. Now all of a sudden interest rates go from 0% to 5%. That's going to create some massive problems for everyone. And I think that what his point is that they're not going to be able to win the fight against inflation, because we can't keep interest rates this high as everything starts blowing up around us if inflation continues to persist, which who knows, probably does. What's your take on that? Do you think that we're going to see a point where we just have to get used to higher inflation, and that ultimately creates the opportunity for precious metals?
That's a really good question. First of all, you consume some strange bedtime material. I don't know most people who like horror movies to wind down, but
Jordan watches Friends at night. I watch Peter Schiff and Danielle DiMartino Booth.
There you go. It's a great question. Now, forget the existing debt that we have to service. We're also still creating new debt.
Yeah.
And so I think we're past the point of no return. Mm-hmm. And I think what central banks have shown us is they're trying to monetize themselves out of this debt, pay the debt they do have back with worthless dollars. The challenge with that, though, is you get to a point, the Minsky moment, where the wheels come off, right? And so, I don't know how it's all going to end. Mm-hmm. Is it going to end in a new monetary system that we have to usher in, mm-hmm. right? Is it going to end where, I go to the grocery store and a loaf of bread is going to cost me, pick the number, right? $800 a loaf, right? How does it all end? I don't know, but we're still at a point where there's so much dollar-denominated debt that there's still an unwind that has to occur, and these things take time until they don't.
Yeah.
And it's like trying to put your finger on when the confidence leaves the system.
Yeah.
And when it does, that the old system goes no bid, and what's been money for 5,000 years goes full bid. And if you look at where gold traded in the Weimar Republic, right? Mm-hmm. It's numbers that are bigger than any headline, any thumbnail. because, how do you measure it? And so I don't know how it's, if you go back to '06, I got in the business in '04.
Yeah.
And after coming into these conferences and listening and learning and keeping my eyes and ears open, I thought, okay, I thought by 2006, we were going to go into a rate hiking cycle. There was too much debt, and I really was convinced that there were some big issues that we were heading into. And you know what? I was right. We had the GFC 2 years later, but what I never predicted was QE. And all this, and now at the time there was essentially that first round of printing just went in to shore up financial institutions. So you didn't have the volatility, you didn't have the velocity come into the system, so it didn't take prices higher. But as we had the COVID pandemic and the money went into the hands of the consumer, now you've seen it. You've seen it in your energy bills, you've seen it at the grocery store. And so how do you service trillions, quadrillions, and all the derivatives? And it's a pretty scary situation. I don't know how it ends. What I'm doing is I've got 55% of my net worth in precious metals. I've got about 20% in real estate, hard assets. So and then I've got a little bit of cash because you just don't know if we do get a depression. You want to be ready for buying opportunities.
Mm-hmm. And I was chatting with Rick about this, and specifically Canada, which a lot of our audience is Canada. I know you're Canadian based, and the problems that we're sort of entering into. And after those words, quantitative easing, were first said by Ben Bernanke, it was like all bets were off on what governments would do. This idea of austerity and budgets balancing themselves kind of came into play, and it's funny. I don't mean to get all political, but when the Conservatives first attacked Trudeau and said, because he said the budget will balance itself, that it feels like that quote he'll never live down. And now we kind of look at a spot where Canada's in, and it feels like we're going to enter a point where the Canadian dollar is just naturally going to go on its way down as we see what's happening with real estate. And I can't help but think that the only way for Canada to get itself back on track is mining. And I hope that some of the projects, whether we're talking about yours or a lot of these other projects, and we're going to get into Dolly Varden in a second, that have kind of ran into all of these regulatory issues where we're just not seeing them go into development. That narrative, I shouldn't say narrative, that those hurdles no longer exist, or at least exist in a lesser extent than they currently do. What's your take on what's happening right now? We just last week, for example, we had the industry minister, Francois Philippe Champagne, come out and with a directive that they want to block or scrutinize acquisitions of Canadian mining companies. Obviously, we've seen what happens with Chinese capital flowing into Canadian mining names. What's your take right now on the government's sort of opposition to mining in Canada, and do you think that that is going to have to change?
So, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Now, on one hand, you've got some of these policies where capital gains taxes are going up. I live in British Columbia. I live in just south of Vancouver, where you've got vacancy taxes. You've got now they're talking about a new luxury home tax and defining a luxury home as $1 million property. And so you've had all this inflation come into the system, right? And now they're taxing those who have, right? And so look, I'm really optimistic about our country's future because I think we live in the greatest country on the planet, but it's our responsibility to be those agents for change. And I do agree with you. Like, if you look at history, what got Canada through tough times 100 years ago, got them through and were thriving during the Depression, was mining, particularly gold mining. And what I'm seeing, actually, left or right, in British Columbia, is incredible leadership, by government. Okay, I'm not talking about the federal government. I'm talking about the provincial government in terms of working with First Nations groups, working with mining companies, permitting projects like Artemis Blackwater, permitting projects in the Golden Triangle, regionally, being sensitive to what communities want projects, and then working with, respecting water and indigenous groups and doing it the right way. So I'm actually uber optimistic about where the country could go. And it reminds me of something Rick Rule says. He says, the cure for low prices are low prices, right? The cure for bad government is bad government. So, it's getting so bad that it's going to inspire us to elect a new leader and get this company moving in the right direction. And I believe it'll happen. And I believe that, Canada's going to be the greatest country on the planet if we get the right leadership and we get the right, we've got all the natural resources. We've got, clean air, clean water, an incredible workforce. We need to invest in the country. And the other thing is we should not punish foreign investment. That is a very, very dangerous precedent. We should, I believe we should be incentivizing business, and and we should be reducing the size of government.
It's okay for the Canadian pension plan to invest heavily in Asia, but it's not okay for China to invest in Canada. Let's get into Dolly Varden. Since we last spoke, you guys put out some drill results. What can you tell us?
So it's a great project, and it's a pleasure to drive it forward. We've got a 15-kilometer trend, and we think every 1.4 kilometers we've got an opportunity for a new deposit. And that's an idea we validated with our last press release as we hit 2 more, Moose and Chance. The results are incredible, 3,600 grams of silver in drilling. And in addition to understanding that we've got this mineralized trend and that we've got new deposits forming every 1.5 kilometers along this 15-kilometer trend, understanding the plunge, understanding the dip, the geometry, and being able to fingerprint where big deposits are on the property, and then looking for those signatures in other areas, and seeing some similarities, is increased our success rate. So we've got close to 150 million ounces of silver throughout the property so far. But what intrigues me about the area and the prospectivity is there's about 1.2 billion ounces of high-grade silver outside of our property. So you look at like the Eskay Creek mine that had 200 million ounces of silver at 2,400 grams per ton. Brucejack, Premier. My question I'm trying to answer this year: does Dolly Varden become like some of the legends in the Golden Triangle, like Newmont's Brucejack, like Skeena's Eskay, like Ascot's Premier? Do we go from this historic mine, which was the richest in the British Empire, Canada's 3rd largest silver mine, and does it go into that legendary category? And I think it has the potential, and I think we're starting to go from this historic mine to a modest mine, and we're on the verge of, our drill results, best in the Golden Triangle in 2022, best in the Golden Triangle in 2023. If we could do that again this year, I think we have demonstrated that this is one of the great deposits.
So Shawn, just hearing you talk about sort of your vision and sort of what you guys could be, I got to ask specifically, where do you see Dolly Varden in 5 to 10 years? Is your plan to build this into a producer?
So when I came into this company, it was a tiny company that nobody believed in. And we just went in and we gave it a lot of love. We worked it. We went in and we looked at the historic data, and we invested into trying to grow and expand, do regional consolidation. So my vision then was the company was trading at 40 cents an ounce in the ground, and there was about 40 million ounces. Today, we've added 100 million ounces, and we've got a valuation closer to $2 an ounce in the ground. Well, why are we trading there? Well, it's like the third highest grade pure silver project on the planet. That's the number one reason. We've got size, we've got grade, we're in a good jurisdiction. The question that I have in the vision that I see is this company trading at $4 an ounce in the ground. And you know, when silver shot up in 2020, it was trading at $4 an ounce in the ground. It'll go back there. The question is, how many ounces do we have when it gets there? Is there going to be 200 million, which would represent an $800 million valuation? We're currently trading at 300. Is there going to be more? Is there going to be 250? That would translate into $1 billion valuation. We are very, very keen to continue to grow the deposit, but we're doing things that with an eye to development. So we are doing the engineering work, the baseline work. We're doing what you would need to do to move it towards production. But the most exciting and the toughest thing to do in our industry is discovery, and it's the most rewarding. So we've got a project that's delivering, organically growing. You know, most companies have to go out and make expensive acquisitions at wild premiums, and we don't have to do that. So, you know, where do I see this company going? Look, I see silver going higher. I see us making new discoveries. So I see us growing. It's all relative, right? Because when I took over, it was a $20 million company. It's a $315 million company today. But other companies also have grown in the industry at the same time, right? So does it get acquired by a larger entity? Possibly. Do we build it ourselves? We could. Regardless of what happens, we have made some good decisions, like raising money from a position of strength. When the market pulls back, getting aggressive and making acquisitions, always, you know, communicating with our shareholders, our stakeholders, treating, you know, our local partners with respect and being transparent. I think if you continue to move the company forward and just do the next right thing, you know, good things will happen.
Well, Shawn, I love speaking with you. I think you are great at what you do. Excellent work so far with Dolly Varden, taking it from that early stages to having the size of a resource, or I guess I should say deposit, that you have now. And hopefully you keep coming back on here as you get to those bigger and bigger discoveries and continue to go and re-rate your stock. And we really appreciate you doing this.
Well, I think you're great at what you do, and I'd love for you to come up and see Dolly in person. And I'm surrounded by incredible scientists, incredible partners, whether it's M&A bankers or investment bankers. We've got some incredible consultants, and it's a great project.
Thanks for coming on, Shawn.
Thanks for having me on.